Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for coming today. Just to introduce myself, my name is Joseph O'Leary. I'm a senior researcher at Full Fact. Apologies for my colleague Phoebe Arnold, who was going to be here today, but as is the nature of fact-checking, was called away at the last minute to do important stuff back in the office. So apologies for her, but hopefully I can keep you entertained for the next hour. Just to give you some background, I've been fact-checking at Full Fact now for the last 6 years. And in that time, we've seen far too much politics, as many members of the public would tell us. I've seen 2 general elections now, 2 referendums, or 3 referendums actually, including Scotland. So there's been no shortage of politics and no shortage of experience that fact-checking has given us and lessons that we've learned. And I'm here today to talk to you a little bit about some of the lessons that we learned as an organisation from Brexit and fact-checking the EU referendum. And since, as unexpected as it was, we just had a general election, then I'd very happily share some of the experiences that we had in just the last few weeks with you as well. First of all, I want to just establish the background to all of this. Full Fact was set up in 2010 in response to a very real problem that was first articulated in 2002 by Professor Onora O'Neill, who said that there is a problem that in society there is too little trust of politicians. Not so much her position, but there was very little trust in politicians, people in positions of authority. And she asked the question, is this a good thing, is this a bad thing? And is there anything that we can do about this lack of trust? And her point was that often our response to a lack of trust is to throw open transparency. So open data, providing evidence behind what we say. Transparency is important. And while true, transparency in her argument is not enough, because what people are left with is a torrent of information, noise, not quite know who to believe, because you have politicians, campaigners on both sides of a debate throwing claims at you, and you've almost got no idea how to judge their veracity, who to believe or not. She characterised this as a dichotomy between being forced to place blind trust or blind cynicism in the information that you receive. Neither of those is desirable. What she said was we need to try and aspire to achieve informed trust in the claims that we see. And the necessary ingredients for that are not only transparency, but active checking of claims. So the ability that we have to do our own fact-checking, to be our own journalists, and I'm talking about every member of the public here, not just the world of journalism. The ability for us to be able to do that gives us that power to place that level of trust. And that's where the idea for Full Fact sprang up from. Can you have an organisation, and in fact there are fact-checking groups like us across the world now, that is tasked specifically not only with taking those unsubstantiated claims out of circulation, but of actually being an advocate for fact-checking in general. Can we get even members of the public knowing how to do their own fact-checking to be able to hold politicians to account? That's the background behind which we serve. There is probably a myth at the moment that I hear again and again, that trust in politicians has never been lower. It's a little more complicated than that. If you look at polling by Ipsos Mori that's been done since 1995, and in fact before then as well, trust in politicians, if that's clear enough, has pretty much always been pretty dreadful. Right? We are fewer than 1 in 5 of us at the moment, and closer to 1 in 10 of us, trust politicians to tell the truth. And how does this rank in the hierarchy of occupations? Well, I've got a few other examples. I'm afraid journalists are not much better. Again, very little change, maybe a slight uptick in the last 10 years, but still pretty low on the league table. How about business leaders? Not much better, but definitely better than both journalists and politicians. Civil servants. Now we're starting to get into, most of us would trust civil servants to tell the truth. The police. Some of us don't trust the police at all. Others place a lot of trust in the police. Overall, the police are quite a trusted profession. Judges do even better. And doctors. Obviously, many professions missed out in between. This is the general gist of it. Doctors are the most trusted profession and have been among the most trusted for almost the last 10, 15 years. So what's remarkable about this graph, firstly, is how badly the people at the centre of public life do in their levels of trust. But also how the basic order of this, apart from the little jostling between journalists and politicians, hasn't changed. Hasn't changed in the last 20 years. And I think that tells us a lot about, we think we might perceive a changing landscape, but fundamentally a lot of things have stayed exactly the same. And if we perceive this as a problem, then there's something more fundamentally wrong than simply all the things that we've been doing about fact-checking and journalism in the last 5 years. So I want you to bear that background in mind for the rest of this presentation, because Full Fact obviously doesn't take a position on whether this is a good or a bad thing. What we want to see is more people being able to place informed trust. Maybe if everyone had access to information, they oughtn't to trust politicians and journalists and business leaders, and they ought to trust the others. That's not a position that we take. Now, 4 things that we learned as an organisation more than anything during fact-checking Brexit. I would summarise as these. Answering the right questions, not just the questions that people are asking, but the questions that really matter to people who will end up going to vote. Working with experts, reaching the widest possible audience, and live fact-checking. So I'm going to go through each of these in turn and talk a bit about what Full Fact did and what fact-checking can do in the future, because we're in a rapidly changing environment, and already we've had a general election since then, and who knows, another general election maybe later this year. So answering the right questions. If there's one claim above any that surfaced during the referendum, it's that bus. It's the 350 million a week that has become infamous. It's remarkable, actually, that a referendum could be summarised so much about a claim. You look at the last general election we just had, there's no standout claim that you could say defined our election. If there's a standout claim that defined the referendum, it was that bus. I want to talk to you a little bit about how we went about fact-checking that and our experiences of it. First of all, an analogy. This is what fact-checking is like for me. It's not just about reading someone else's analysis of something, reading an expert point of view, judging whether it's reasonable or not. It's actually going there for yourself and finding the point, the actual source of that data, the place in which that data was born, and why, from that point of origin, did it get misunderstood, misused, and turned into a claim that was widely debunked and yet still used. So, the bus. We send the EU 350 million a week. Let's fund our NHS instead. Okay, so let's, at the moment, if you search for this claim, it is not difficult to find fact-checking, because this claim has been so thoroughly debunked that all the main results that you will find if you just type it into Google are fact checks. Full Fact, Reality Check, Guardian, loads of different sources, the Telegraph, the claims that won it for Brexit fact-checked. Fact-checking has basically made it to the top, and it's everywhere about this claim. Now, this claim first surfaced long before the referendum. It first surfaced in roughly October 2015. And you can actually adjust the search. So if you actually say, no, don't tell me anything before October 2015. I think it's... You take away October 2013 and all of a sudden the 350 million is nowhere to be seen. You can see it in a few previews, but those are later published snippets anyway. It was nowhere to be seen until October 2015, when Vote Leave, the newly established campaign group, started to claim it. It actually is the evolution of an older claim, and that claim is that we send £55 million a day to the EU, which you can imagine is roughly the same claim. It roughly adds up to the same amount with generous rounding. The 55 million a day claim was prevalent for a few years, even before the referendum. And if you went and looked for that on the internet, you'd find it very difficult to find the source. Eventually, we found out from UKIP, who were claiming it at the time, that it came from the ONS. Specifically, this charming document, the United Kingdom Balance of Payments, the Pink Book 2015. Now, remember, I'm taking you on the complete exploration of this. I'm taking you to the exact source of where this was first born. Hopefully you can get the sense of fascination that this brings you. Oh, we're actually going to the data itself. So the 2015 Pink Book, that was the latest balance of payments data that was published at the time. The balance of payments are data that tells us about the UK's economic transactions with other countries in our trade in goods and services. And UKIP at the time had got their claim from specific data about how our current account, basically our balance sheet with other countries, breaks down. And they found out that, look at what we send to the EU. Now, unfortunately, the website itself isn't that nice, so you actually have to go to the tables themselves. And if you've done fact-checking yourself, you'll spend a great deal of your time in spreadsheets. And spreadsheets are the love of our lives at Full Fact. Now, that 55 million a day is here. That number right there. This spreadsheet tells you in millions, this is what all these numbers are, what's the value of our transactions with different countries, different geographic places around the world. And this section of the spreadsheet is telling us debits, i.e. what are we sending out of the country to these different locations, basically. And the figure for EU institutions, 19,994, that's basically 20 billion. And 20 billion pounds, if you divide it, gets you roughly to 55 million pounds a week. And that's where this claim was born. It was born in this spreadsheet, in this data set. That's where it was born. That's where it came from. Instantly, you can start to see some of the aspects of this story. This 350 million a week, 55 million a day, is not a net figure, it's a gross figure. What that means is we're talking about debits. We're talking about what gets sent out. We're not talking about what comes back. Obviously, it's a two-way process. And that's one of the aspects to this claim that we ended up fact-checking quite a lot. Anyway, the claim evolved because this particular spreadsheet is actually not the best source you could do. There's actually another table in here that's specifically designed to tell you the UK's official transactions with institutions of the EU. And the 350 million pound a day claim comes from here. A week claim comes from here. So what it tells you here is very similar figure, this time 19 billion. In 2014, that was total debits, official transactions with the EU. So what this spreadsheet is telling us is, in 2014, 20 billion pounds of UK taxpayers' money went to the EU. And if you're interested, 9 billion came back to specific projects. We can't necessarily control all of where that is spent. That was one of Vote Leave's points. They want to talk about what gets sent out because we can't control what comes back, whatever benefit it might be. Okay, so this looks fairly straightforward now. Okay, so what we can say about this number is 350 million a week. Well, that's one way of expressing this. It represents what goes out. It doesn't represent what comes back in. So the context of this story is, yes, we do send that, but some comes back. At least that's how it appears. Actually, that's wrong. That's the wrong conclusion. We don't send £350 million a week, as I'm sure you've read many, many times. The reason for that, and again, this is the source data, you will not get more primary than this. The reason for that is this number. That is £4.4 billion worth of rebate that is basically a discount that the UK gets on its payments. The UK never sends that money abroad. It gets deducted from our payments initially. So actually, what we actually send to the EU is 19 minus 4. It's closer to 15 billion. Now, you wouldn't necessarily know that from this spreadsheet, right? I just picked out another number up there in the spreadsheet. If you followed it, I've gone into the credits section and I found, oh yes, Fontainebleau abatement, which is basically the rebate. That's a credit, which means, okay, so the UK gets this money coming in. Now, that is a crucial caveat to this claim, and yet it's not at all obvious from this spreadsheet. So how does a fact checker go about working this out? How do you work out that this claim is problematic? Well, the answer is this spreadsheet does not help you to do that. And it's actually something that we raised with the ONS at the time, and the ONS have since reacted to. The fact is this spreadsheet is potentially quite misleading in how it presents the data. The truth of the matter is the abatement isn't really a credit. It's a deduction of a debit. So when you think about it, if you get a discount 50% on a dress you buy from Marks and Spencer's, you don't pay all the money and then they give you 50 quid in cash back, for what you spent. You just never pay it. You get the discount straight away. And this is really crucial to understanding this claim. This spreadsheet doesn't really tell you it. I'll tell you what does. There's another source. And a good fact checker always knows to look for all the possible sources of the information. The Treasury publish a regular release all about European Union finances. This is their 2016 version, and at the time of the referendum we had the 2015 version available to us. And this is a long and boring document, but if you actually go to the bit that you need, which is fairly late on, this table C3, and it's telling us something very similar to the ONS table, but in a subtly different way. Remember the 2014 numbers that we got from the ONS. So we're looking not quite in the latest column. Where's that 19 billion? I can't see any 19 billion numbers there, can you? The truth is the 19 billion doesn't exist anymore because the table has been presented to us completely differently. Remember the value of our rebate, 4.416 million in 2016. There's the number again, 4.416 million. Except this time it's not a credit, it's a debit, it's a contribution. It's been provided with the numbers that show what goes out, and it's a negative value. So you've got all these positive values of what we contribute, and then all of a sudden this discount slapped on, which means in the end it's only 14 billion, and last year it was 13 billion in 2015. Nothing in the credits were about 10 billion and 8 billion. So this table, even though the figures are roughly the same with some minor differences, is actually telling us something very different. And what the Treasury actually say, and you have to search quite a bit for it because it's not easy to find this stuff. The Treasury explain in this little paragraph here, the effect of the rebate is to reduce the amount of the UK's payments to the EU budget. It does not involve any transfer of money from the Commission or other member states to the Exchequer. That is the clincher paragraph that proves to you that the UK never sends as much as 20 billion, the equivalent of £350 million a week to the EU. Now that is a fact check done from the primary sources. That's what it involves. It involves looking at the numbers and understanding not just what the numbers say, but what those numbers mean. This table is probably the best source to use if you want the figures. Even though the ONS itself is a primary source, the way that they do the figures, they do it according to some national accounting principles. That's why they count it as a debit. But it doesn't reflect reality. It doesn't tell you where this money comes or goes from. And that's why you get the mistaken impression if you looked at this spreadsheet even for hours, that we send that much. That number is a pure theoretical number, does not represent what we send. So that's the fact check using the source data. Remember the question that I started off with, answering the right questions. Now, basically, if you run through all the numbers and you do it properly, you don't get 350 million a week. You get 250 million a week. Now, that was all a very fascinating process, but at the end of the day, what difference does it make? 250 million a week sounds just as big a number to many people as 350 million. The truth is, it's not enough to stop there. A fact check cannot stop at simply answering whether the number itself is right or wrong and providing the context. The bigger question is, well, what is this claim actually trying to communicate to you? It's trying to give you a sense of what the EU costs the UK. Even though it's been provided in these very specific terms, we send the EU, that bus is basically saying, in not so many words, this is what the EU costs the UK. And actually, that question is much more complicated than those spreadsheets I showed you. The UK's membership of the EU has all sorts of aspects to do with trade, to do with the value of the research grants that we get, what immigrants add to the economy, what they take away. There are so many more aspects to this debate than a pure transaction. And the trap here for fact checkers is to take the framing of the debate and go with it and basically say, no, the answer is 250 million. Sorry, you're wrong. Well, it's not just that. It's that actually there's a bigger question going on here. As it turns out, roughly, say hypothetically, leaving the EU would reduce the size of the economy by 1% other than it would have been. That would be enough to totally wipe out savings that we might have made from this transaction. On the other hand, it might turn out that our economy does better. Most economists believed it would do worse and still do. But the fact is, those little changes in those big economic factors that include all those bigger issues that I talk about completely wipe out all these sums we're talking about here and make them seem almost insignificant. So that's the bigger context. It's, well, yes, it's 250 million, but there's other stuff that you should care about too. If you're answering the question, what does the EU cost us? And you need to think of you need to come to a view on what you think of those bigger questions if you want the best impression of it, the full facts, so to speak. I've talked a lot about Vote Leave. The Remain campaign had a major claim of its own, although far less memorable. In fact, I don't know how many of you recognise it, but this was said several times by the Remain campaign. The cost to UK families if Britain leaves the EU, £4,300 per year from the government. And they were saying this several times. They'd actually published their own analysis to show where it came from. Now, how would you fact check that? Well, it turns out this one's a little more simple. It's simply a government analysis. If I can find it. So the Treasury published its own analysis, the long-term economic impact of EU membership and the alternatives. And I only need to do a quick find, where was this figure, to see it's not the most primary place you could find it, but it's a pretty good indication. There it is, £4,300 a year. Now, one of the things that you do as fact checkers a lot is you work out what on earth does this table mean. You see the number, okay, that's where it is. Now, what does the table mean? This is the table of scenarios that the Treasury produced. If we leave the EU and we have circumstances A, circumstances B, circumstances C, what would happen to the economy? And the middle circumstance, in a way, not the most extreme either way, was to negotiate a bilateral agreement. And they said, oh, that will cause GDP to fall by 6.2%. GDP per capita will fall by 1,800. GDP per household 4,300 a year, and they provide confidence intervals as well. As it turns out, maybe if we had what some people call the no-deal option on trade, just the WTO, that would have been much more costly. And they think, oh, it wouldn't be as costly if we stayed in the European Economic Area. Now, all these are numbers, and there's not a lot we can do to scrutinise them just from this table. They're just numbers. What the Treasury did was that they did their own modelling, their own impact assessments on this. And respected economists looked at this and said, actually, these numbers are fairly reasonable ways to come to these conclusions. So these numbers were backed up, although with the obvious caveat, how do you know the future? No one knows the future. So these very numbers in themselves, you have to treat them with a pinch of salt. Although there's nothing untoward, nothing dodgy about the way they came about. Remember the question. You have to answer the right question. It's not just about, okay, we found the number in a table, it's subject to uncertainty because it's about the future. A fact check that stops there is insufficient again. Because remember what the claim was in the first place. £4,300 a year cost to UK families. What the government is telling you, or was telling you, is that your family will be worse off by £4,300 a year. Now, obviously, not these figures are averages, right? It's basically taking GDP, the loss in GDP, and dividing it by all the households in the country. So you can always say, oh, it's just an average figure. Some households will be more affected, some households will be less affected. Of course, those things are true. But that's not what this is about at all. GDP per household does not tell you anything about the experience of individual households. GDP is a huge composite number that comprises what businesses produce, for instance. It's a lump sum for what we produce as the value of the economy. Now, do you really think that every penny of what we produce, no matter where it comes from in the economy, divides neatly into households? Does every household see the benefits of that? Of course not. It's a figure that is GDP per household as a measure is not something that the Office for National Statistics uses. There are much more sophisticated ways of measuring household income. You don't do that by taking a big number and just dividing it by the number of households. So this number might be perfectly, perfectly thoroughly researched, taking into account uncertainty, but it actually doesn't tell you anything about the claim. The claim is about you and your family, and this is just a number that doesn't actually mean much to you and your family. That's the right question to be answering. And the truth of the matter is, this claim is not fit for purpose if you're trying to answer the question, what does this mean for me? Those are two really big claims that we saw during the referendum. A final point to make is that, obviously, as fact checkers and journalists, we have to present these findings. How do we present our findings in a way that gets to the point? One of my favourite examples of this is anything to do with public spending. When you present figures on public spending, what do we spend in the UK on education or on health? You're interested, well, not only in the cash value of what you're spending, but what's actually happened to inflation. Because, my can of Coke might now cost me £1, £1.20. But the fact is, well, I'm richer than I used to be. So does that change the calculation somewhat? Take an example. This is the adult national minimum wage in the UK since it was adopted in the year 2000. It started at just over £3.50, and in 2016 it hit £6.70. This is a perfectly accurate and informative graph. It's telling you what the minimum wage is. It's not very useful because that isn't telling you, well, how does that feel to my pocket? Am I having to dig any deeper into my pocket than I was before? Does that minimum wage go as far as it needs to for me? The fact is, inflation, which is always happening, eats away at the value of that minimum wage every year. If you adjust that line for inflation, the fact that prices tend to go up every year, you get an almost remarkable transformation. It's almost this sagging effect. We started with a staircase, and now we've got a sagging staircase. And that's actually there's much more reality in this graph than the previous one. The minimum wage goes up in a lump sum every October. So that's why, even in terms of inflation, the value of the minimum wage always shoots up about once a year. But because the minimum wage doesn't change, and yet stuff gets more expensive, then the value of that wage deteriorates and deteriorates as the year goes on, and then it goes up again. And what this line tells you is the big story, which is the value of the minimum wage. From between 2000 and 2008, it was getting more valuable. It was going up fast enough to beat prices. And then since 2008, and we had the financial difficulties in this country, we had the recession, the value of that wage deteriorated. It kept rising in cash terms. The staircase kept going up, but it stopped rising quickly enough to keep up with prices. And so you actually saw a reduction in people's spending power, basically, because their minimum wage wasn't going as far as it used to. In one graph, you've told a story with so much more context by providing the necessary background, which is inflation. Okay, the second of my 4 lessons from Brexit was working with experts. Now, Michael Gove famously said, to quote him rather selectively, we've had enough of experts. It's a really interesting point of view because, of course, a lot of people take the view that experts were saying one thing, the public were believing another. That £350 million a week was extensively debunked, and yet polling by Ipsos Mori after the election found that almost half of us, maybe slightly more than half of us, believed it to be true. So something wasn't getting through, perhaps. But working with experts is something that we learned is important, and it's not a problem fact-checking can solve on its own, the public's engagement with experts. But we need to engage with experts as fact-checkers. During the referendum, we had some major partnerships with expert bodies in different subject areas of expertise in the UK. So we worked with the Nuffield Trust, who work on health research. They helped us look at the effect of immigration on NHS staffing, and also the Migration Observatory. They helped us look into the labour market and public finances impacts of immigration. Are they good or are they bad? And the UK in a Changing Europe, finally, an excellent organisation which brought together a community of experts during the referendum campaign. We produced a report with them, the facts behind the claims. We worked with those experts to summarise the big claims in the referendum, all in one place, and produce the goods on that. Now, what we learned from this is several things, really. The first is that these expert bodies were always out there, right? If full fact didn't exist, these bodies would still exist doing what they did. But the point is, full fact brought these bodies together and gave them a voice. And if there's something that experts need, it's a voice. If indeed the public is fed up with experts, perhaps experts are not doing the right things themselves. Experts need an established reputation. Otherwise, it's just an anonymous sounding body that's quoted in a newspaper article, and the public's expected to believe the IFS or the CDUR or all these acronymed places that are supposedly experts, but, well, I've never heard of them or she's never heard of them, so why should we believe you? The fact is, reputation needs to be established. Reputation needs to be earned. I think research showed after the referendum that one of the most trusted people in terms of giving out information during the referendum campaign was Martin Lewis, who runs moneysavingexpert.com. He's an established figure. A lot of people know about him in this country. They've seen him on talk shows. They've been to his website to get financial advice. He's an established expert, and people trusted him because people recognised him. I don't know what proportion of the population could name the UK in a Changing Europe, the Nuffield Trust, the Migration Observatory. I expect a minority, probably more than could name full fact, but I expect a minority of people have heard of these places. Now that's a problem because expertise needs a voice. These organisations don't just go into Google and type in the latest stats. They actually have expertise. They run the analyses that we can't do as a smaller organisation. They run the analyses that we can't do as members of the public. And they produce genuinely useful information. The point is they need a megaphone. And that's what Full Fact was here to do during the referendum and in the last election. It's to bring together expertise to make it communicative. One of our partners, the National Foundation for Educational Research, we work with in education, particularly during the 2015 election. And they didn't ordinarily publish briefings on the big issues, but we produced them with them. And we helped them with their expertise and our expertise in communication. We produced really great products that were simple enough that a mass audience could actually grasp these issues and have a point of view about them. So expertise was really valuable. But like I say, if the public are fed up of experts, experts need established reputation. That's one of the crucial things that they do need. Reaching a wider audience. So Full Fact, as a charity, publishes on our website. You can go to our website and read any fact check that you'd like that we've done. But obviously, who goes to a fact-checking website? Not everyone does that, right? You can't always expect people to come to you. What you need to do is you need to spread your wings and try and get in as many airwaves as possible. And we were very successful during the referendum of working with the likes of the BBC, ITV, Sky News to produce our fact checks there. We actually tried something new as well. Just before the referendum, we worked with Wikipedia and we ran an editathon. And it was basically, we got Full Fact staffers, Wikipedia staffers and members of the public to come in and basically edit Wikipedia, but edit it in a directed way. That we had a purpose in mind, which was to look at some of the issues surrounding the referendum, look at the Wikipedia pages that existed or didn't exist, as the case may be, and see if we could improve them in terms of their sourcing, in terms of the facts that were on those pages, or, as I said, creating them in the first place. This page on Wikipedia, United Kingdom renegotiation of EU membership, we created that. This page was our creation during the editathon. As an organisation, I can't say Full Fact created this. This was the creation of volunteers with Full Fact's help, providing that factual background, providing the research expertise. And Wikipedia obviously has an incredible audience, and the idea that you can bring fact-checking into the world that everyone else is looking at, you reach such a much bigger audience than you ever could have hoped for before. And that's really crucial. We also more recently started doing videos as well. So social media loves videos, and particularly Facebook. If you see on your Facebook feed, you scroll down, you stop at the video. And we started making our own videos, our fact-checking, looking at the big issues, what's happening to immigration, what's the immigration's impact on Brexit. And we were able to summarise those issues too. The final main lesson was live fact-checking and its importance. Live fact-checking is something that Full Fact pioneered in the UK. What is live fact-checking, you might ask? Well, it's basically the Full Fact team watch a live debate. Maybe it's BBC Question Time, maybe it's Prime Minister's Questions, maybe it's an election debate. And we try and respond to claims in real time, publishing those findings on Twitter and more widely. If it's a big enough debate and we have a partnership, we'll do it in partnership with another organisation. So this was us at ITV during the referendum debate. We went into their offices, we worked with their political pundits, supplying them with factual background so that they could go on just 10 minutes after the debate had finished and provide the overview. And this was hugely valuable stuff and really fun as well. There were about 10 of us in the room doing it. It's hectic, and it's worth saying a lot of live fact-checking isn't genuinely live. You need to prepare, right? You can't just find any old piece of information at the drop of a hat. You know what to expect. You know that one of them will say 350 million a week. You know what your line is. You prepare. Live fact-checking is about preparation, but it's also about having a cool head, being able to find stuff quickly, and having the editorial judgment to know whether to tweet or not. The presumption with us is don't tweet unless you're sure. And that's very difficult in a live situation. If someone makes a claim and within a minute you've got to respond to it, a novel claim that you've never seen before. Now that's challenging. That's something very, very tough. Live fact-checking is also something that's going to get more difficult as social media grows in importance as a source of news for people. The fact that things are happening so quickly, there's so much more data out there, so many more claims that we can make. That gives rise to the need for automated fact-checking. And that's another project that Full Fact is now working on after the referendum and has been through the election campaign and beyond into the future as well. Automated fact-checking is basically how can a machine do what a human does in a fact-checking office? How can a machine spot that a politician has made a claim, and how can it identify that as a claim, and can it answer that claim? Now those were the lessons that we learned, but I've been talking at you for a while, and I know you'll have a few questions about our experience of Brexit. First of all, I wondered if any of you want to try a bit of live fact-checking for yourself. Do I have an extremely brave volunteer? Go on, at least one.
I'll do it.
Come on down. Thank you. Live fact-checking is something a term that maybe you've heard before, but what does it actually feel like to do? Now, I'm going to pretend to be a politician, and I'm going to make a claim, and my charming volunteer here is going to attempt to live fact-check that claim. Okay, so you have
would you suggest me
the
a
internet.
date? Yeah, not just anything.
The internet is your oyster, so you
Right,
can use
okay.
anything on the internet you like. But I want it to be a primary source, if
Okay.
you can,
Yeah.
and I want you to respond as soon as you can as well. And you can respond to me verbally as if you were tweeting as well.
Okay. Well, that
Okay.
sounds painful. Okay.
Okay.
Hold on. Where's my internet?
And
Give
everyone,
me time.
this is why it needs bravery, because everyone's going to be able to see what you do as well.
I know. I'm either stupid or very brave. Okay.
Ready?
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. So I'm a government politician. We have a record number of people in work in the UK. Go.
Just trying to think, because it's on the spot, isn't it? Trying to think for a term to search for.
Okay, so we've got Joseph Rowntree, Hadley.edu, Office for National Statistics,
I'll go for that.
Trading Economics, okay, unemployment, 4.6%.
I need a comparison, don't I? More data.
The ONS changed the website last year, by the way, or 2 years ago now. If you'd have ever seen the old website, you would not have enjoyed this. Number of unemployed men, unemployed women. I'm moving on in my debate.
Oh goodness, I know. I need to find.
Record number of people are in work in this country. 31 million, in fact. Did you know?
I'm hating you already.
I told you it required bravery.
Yes, yes.
You've actually found the primary source.
I have.
Which is
Yeah, I
excellent.
just need to actually figure out where to do the comparison thing. I need to.
There were
Main points. Yeah. What did you say? How many people in work?
31.
Ah, correct. Almost.
32 there. And
yeah.
so 32 million people in work, 350,000 more than a year earlier.
Yeah, but it doesn't say if it's historically. I mean, you need to check how many years, roughly.
Okay.
So it's comparison to that year.
What was that? It has not been lower?
Okay. The employment rate.
The third paragraph down from the top of the screen.
Yeah, from the bottom. 1, 2, 3. The employment rate was for year yearly. It has not been lower since. Yeah, well. Okay. So it's sort of right.
Hmm? Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Took me forever.
Now that was a very mean exercise, by the way. I do apologise. In work as a proportion of the population. Working age population is normally what they look at. I actually didn't talk about the employment rate though, I simply said there are more people in work. And what you actually realise is that you can't necessarily answer that question straight away even here. There's nowhere in this release that I know of that actually will tell you explicitly there are more people in work than ever before. What you'd have to do is go to the data and look at the historical figures. Or you could just use your common sense. Because the population is always growing in the UK. And believe it or not, there are almost always a record number of people in work. Almost always. 32 million, I can almost guarantee you, is a record. There have never been that many people in work in the UK before. I don't really need to look at the data, partly because I've seen it before. That's cheating, I know. But it's also partly common sense. The population is always growing. There are always more and more jobs being created. What you care about if you want to analyse the government, perhaps, is the employment rate. As a proportion of how many people there are, how well are we doing? Turns out we're doing pretty well there. Joint highest rate of employment since comparable records began. Now, that was excellent, by the way. You found the primary source straight away. It wasn't the latest release, but you could be forgiven because that's where Google sends you. If you know your way around the ONS website, which fortunately you tend to in this job, you start to learn about those weird little things, those things that you need to click to get to the latest release, how to get to the data. Unfortunately, that's probably a minority of fact-checking. Very few fact checks conveniently take you to a page of the ONS website that conveniently tells you the answer. So many claims that you see are derived from that. They're either based on government figures that have been spliced together from different places. They might not be government figures at all. They might be a poll that some company or survey group has done. So then you've got to come to a conclusion as to, well, is that a valid poll? Has it been done with good methods or not? There are so many aspects to it, so many complexities. And you think what we just did there is the kind of thing that you would be doing during live fact-checking, except you've got pretty much no more than a minute to go out, find the best version of the facts you can, find something to tweet, and then decide, can you tweet it? Are you providing the right picture or a partial picture? Full Fact would not tweet, there are 32 million people in work, that's a record number, because the measure itself is not a particularly helpful one. There are always a record number of people in work, pretty much. And so simply saying that, we're just kind of feeding into how that debate has been framed. we can't just tweet that. We need to provide actual sensible context. There are 32 million people in work. That's a record level. This isn't surprising. Actually, you want to look at the employment rate, to look at how impressive it is over time. The employment rate will tell you more, and then we provide the employment rate too. That's just a flavour of what that involves to you. Now I have been talking for a very long time, so I will leave it there. So thank you very much for your patience, and yeah, thank you for listening.